In the vast expanse of the Orion Galactic Confederacy, where thousands of sentient species coexist in what politicians optimistically call harmonious diversity, there exists a fundamental truth that every xenopsychologist learns on day one. All sentient beings have a breaking point. It's coded into their evolutionary psychology, that moment when survival instinct overrides rational thought. The Thraxi collapse into catatonic states when faced with prolonged social isolation. The Vexyurd dissolve into bubbling panic when deprived of their hive-mind connection. The 8-limbed Octuvians surrender completely when their chromatophore communication is disrupted. Every species, without exception, has a clear, well-documented threshold beyond which their psychological resilience crumbles. Well, almost every species. Then there are the humans, the statistical outliers, the evolutionary wildcards that xenopsychologists speak of in hushed, disturbed whispers. Humans don't have breaking points so much as they have creative inflection points. They don't break, Dr. Kulon Ziv, the Confederacy's leading xenopsychologist, once famously stated at a galactic conference. They transform. And may whatever deity you worship help you if you're the cause of that transformation. Nowhere was this particular quirk of human psychology more evident than aboard the mid-range cargo vessel officially registered as the GCS Reasonable Transport LLC, but known to her crew simply as the Reasonable Doubt. A fitting name, as its very existence pushed the boundaries of several Confederacy shipping regulations. Captain Dax Freeborn, human, 5 feet 9 inches of weathered muscle, and questionable decision-making, stood at the bridge viewport, watching the swirling hyperspace currents with the bored expression of someone who's seen it all before, and wasn't particularly impressed the first time. Entering the Cygnus sector in approximately 6 minutes, Captain, announced Navigator Plip, a Thraxi whose translucent body pulsed with nervous blue light. Like most of his species, Plip prided himself on precision and predictability. Thanks, Plip. Any unusual activity on the sensors? Dax asked, stretching his arms overhead in a gesture that made the ship's security officer, Krethne, instinctively flatten her dorsal spines. Nothing unusual, Captain, rumbled Chief Engineer Gorks, a hulking Tellurian whose silicon-based biology made him look like a sentient boulder with surprisingly dexterous appendages. Though I still don't like this route. You never like any route that isn't a straight line, Dax replied with a grin. Efficiency is predictable. Predictability is safe, Gorks mumbled, his crystalline eyes narrowing with concern. And boring, added Lieutenant Mira, the ship's quartermaster and only other human aboard. Her presence always seemed to double the anxiety level of the alien crew members, a phenomenon that both humans found endlessly amusing. Incoming transmission, announced the ship's AI in its unnervingly pleasant voice. Unknown origin. Dax sighed, settling into the captain's chair. Put it through. The view screen flickered to life, revealing a reptilian face with black scales and yellow, slit-pupilled eyes that seemed to calculate profit margins just by looking at you. Cargo vessel, the reptilian figure hissed. Prepare to be boarded for customs inspection. And just like that, another ordinarily routine cargo run was about to become a story that would be told in hushed tones across a dozen star systems. The customs inspectors arrived in a ship that looked about as official as a counterfeit credit chip. Its hull was patched with mismatched metal, and the boarding tube that connected to the Reasonable Doubt's airlock had definitely seen better decades. Kargan Dominion, muttered Gorks, his rocky limbs grinding together anxiously. Pirates. The nasty kind. As opposed to the friendly neighborhood kind. Dax quipped, checking the small pulse pistol hidden in his boot, a clear violation of at least 3 Confederacy weapons treaties. Through the airlock strode a walking arsenal disguised as a reptilian. Commander Vrex of the Kargan Dominion stood 7 feet tall, covered in black scales accented with red markings that Dax recognized as kill tallies. Behind him filed 6 more Kargans, each carrying enough weaponry to start a small revolution. My, Vrex said, his forked tongue flicking between razor-sharp teeth. What an interesting crew compliment. Dax noted how Vrex's yellow eyes lingered on each crew member, assessing them with disturbing precision. The pirate commander wasn't just looking, he was cataloging weaknesses. I am Commander Vrex, he announced with theatrical flair. You may have heard of me. Sorry, can't say that I have, Dax replied with a shrug. We don't really keep up with the D-list celebrity pirates. The Kargans behind Vrex tensed, claws tightening on their weapons. Kreth N.A. shot Dax a horrified look, her dorsal spines fully flattened in terror. Amusing, Vrex said without amusement. Before joining the Dominion, I was a specialist in xenopsychological warfare for the Confederacy military. I know exactly how to break every species in this sector. His eyes fixed on Dax, even the supposedly unbreakable ones. The atmosphere on the bridge grew thick with tension. Plip's blue bioluminescence had faded to a sickly pale color, while Gork's had gone utterly still, the Tellurian equivalent of extreme stress. Now, Vrex continued, gesturing to his armed companions, my associates will escort each of you to separate locations for questioning about your cargo, particularly the unregistered containers in Hold 3. Dax maintained a neutral expression, but mentally cursed. Those containers held medical supplies bound for colonies the Confederacy had abandoned, technically illegal, but morally straightforward. I don't think that's necessary, Dax said calmly. I'm happy to discuss our cargo manifest right here. Oh, but I insist, Vrex replied with a predatory smile. Starting with you, Captain Human. I've always found your species fascinating. So resistant to conventional breaking points. As the pirates began separating the crew, Dax caught Mira's eye. Her subtle nod told him everything he needed to know. The crew might be scared, but they had contingency plans for situations exactly like this one. Vrex personally escorted Dax to the captain's quarters, dismissing the guard with a flick of his clawed hand. You seem remarkably calm, Captain Vrex observed once they were alone. Most species show clear stress indicators by now: pupil dilation, hormone secretions, neural patterns. Maybe I'm just not that impressed by oversized lizards with compensation issues, Dax replied, leaning casually against his desk. Vrex laughed a dry, rattling sound. You know, the Thraxi navigator is already catatonic. Your Tellurian engineer is showing microfractures in his crystalline structure, the first sign of their psychological breakdown. The Octuvian security officer has turned the same shade of gray as your bulkheads, their color for extreme distress. From elsewhere in the ship came the sound of something breaking, followed by a scream that Dax recognized as Plip's. Your crew is reaching their breaking points, Captain, Vrex said with satisfaction. Each according to their species' psychological vulnerabilities. Dax's expression remained unchanged. And what about humans? What's our breaking point? That, Vrex replied, leaning in close enough that Dax could smell his acrid breath, is exactly what I intend to find out. Elsewhere on the ship, Mira was having a rather one-sided conversation with 2 Kargan guards. You know what's interesting about humans? She asked conversationally as one guard rummaged through her quarters while the other kept a disruptor trained on her head. We evolved as pursuit predators. The guard searching her belongings paused. What relevance does this have? Oh, just making conversation, Mira shrugged. Most galactic species evolved from ambush predators or prey animals. But humans? We just kept chasing our food until it collapsed from exhaustion. For days sometimes. The guard with the disruptor shifted uncomfortably. Persistence hunting, we call it, Mira continued cheerfully. Fascinating psychological implications. When most species face overwhelming odds, their instinct is fight or flight. But humans, we developed a third option: endure and outlast. Meanwhile, in the engine room, two more pirates were discovering that intimidating a silicon-based life form was harder than expected. "Your captain will break," one hissed at Gorks. "All organics break eventually." Gorks's crystalline eyes remained fixed on the warp core. "Captain Dax doesn't break. I've seen him work 36 hours straight during a Cascadian wormhole collapse, then celebrate with something humans call tequila before starting another shift." Back in the captain's quarters, Vrex circled Dax like a predator evaluating prey. "Let me tell you a story, Captain," Vrex said. "During my military career, I once captured a Cephalon diplomat. Their species breaks when faced with darkness evolutionary response to their binary star system. After 16 hours in complete darkness, the diplomat gave me everything: access codes, security protocols, even offered his own offspring as hostages." "Fascinating," Dax replied dryly. "Do you have a point, or do you just enjoy bragging about war crimes?" "My point," Vrex snarled, "is that I've studied your species. Humans have fought in every major conflict since joining the Confederacy. Always outnumbered, often outgunned, yet somehow prevailing. I've analyzed the psychological profiles of human POWs. The results were inconsistent." Dax suppressed a smile. "Maybe you're just not as good at breaking things as you think." Vrex's scales darkened with anger. "Your navigator provided the location of your hidden cargo after just 8 minutes of isolation. Your engineer revealed the override codes when threatened with crystalline destabilization. Your security officer turned herself inside out, a defense mechanism of her species rather than face psychological pressure." A slight frown crossed Dax's face. Concern for his crew was the first genuine emotion he'd displayed. "Ah," Vrex noted with satisfaction. "There it is. Perhaps that's the human breaking point: harm to your social group. Any pack bonding species share this vulnerability." "You're making a mistake," Dax said quietly. "Am I?" Vrex leaned closer. "Let's test this theory. My men are currently entertaining your fellow human, Lieutenant Mira. I believe she's quite important to you." For the first time, something dangerous flickered behind Dax's eyes. Vrex noticed it immediately. "Yes, that's it. The famous human loyalty. So exploitable." Over the ship's intercom came a sudden cry of pain, unmistakably Mira's voice. And then something happened that made Vrex instinctively step back. Dax smiled. Not the forced, diplomatic smile of negotiations. Not the tight, controlled smile of someone enduring stress. This was something ancient and predatory, the smile of a species that had clawed its way to planetary dominance, despite being neither the strongest nor the fastest. "Commander Vrex," Dax said with unsettling calmness, "I think you've just made a fundamental error in your xenopsychological assessment." Across the ship, the Kargan pirates were starting to experience an unfamiliar sensation: unease. In the cargo hold, the two guards watching Mira were finding their intimidation tactics strangely ineffective. Despite a bleeding cut across her cheek, she was humming a cheerful tune while casually examining her fingernails. "What's that you're humming?" one guard finally asked, disturbed by her apparent lack of fear. "Oh, just an old Earth song," Mira replied. "It's called Another One Bites the Dust." Seemed appropriate. In the captain's quarters, Vrex was reassessing his approach. The human's unexpected smile had triggered something primal in his reptilian brain, a warning system evolved over millions of years. "You seem to be operating under a misconception," Dax said, leaning forward in his chair. "You think a breaking point is where something shatters. For humans, it's where something begins." Vrex's tongue flicked nervously. "Explain." "When most species reach their limit, they shut down. When humans reach ours, we get creative. Dax tapped his fingers rhythmically on the desk. Did you know that during the Earth's second global conflict, surrounded soldiers in a place called Bastogne were asked to surrender? Their commander's reply was just 2 words: nuts. Then they kept fighting despite being outnumbered, outgunned, and in sub-zero temperatures. Primitive defiance doesn't impress me, Vrex scoffed, though his tail twitched anxiously. It's not defiance, Dax corrected. It's adaptation. You see, the interesting thing about psychological breaking points is that they're supposed to protect a species from self-destruction. But humans, we weaponized ours. A small chime sounded from Dax's wrist communicator. He glanced at it casually. What was that? Vrex demanded. Just a notification that the ship's environmental controls are functioning properly, Dax said with that same unsettling smile. Elsewhere, Mira had somehow managed to free her hands while keeping her guards distracted with increasingly disturbing human history anecdotes. So anyway, after 80 days at sea with no water, the sailors started drinking their own. Enough, interrupted one guard, looking distinctly nauseated. How do you know these things? Oh, basic human education includes studying all the creative ways we've survived impossible situations, she replied cheerfully. You never know when you might need to recreate historical survival techniques. As if on cue, the lights in the cargo hold flickered once, twice, then dimmed to emergency levels. What's happening? Demanded the guard. Probably nothing to worry about, Mira assured him with a smile eerily similar to Dax's. In the engineering section, Gorks was watching with a mixture of horror and admiration as the ship's environmental systems began reconfiguring according to the contingency plan. Dax had insisted they practice monthly, a plan that skirted several Confederacy regulations on acceptable use of life support systems. Back in the captain's quarters, Vrex was becoming increasingly agitated as ship-wide alerts began sounding. What have you done? He demanded. Me? Nothing at all, Dax replied, spreading his hands innocently. I've been right here with you. But if I had to guess, I'd say the ship's AI is executing Protocol Omega. What is Protocol Omega? Well, unofficially we call it crazy human time, Dax explained conversationally. See, Mira and I realized early on that most species have predictable responses to threats. So we designed a system specifically to exploit those predictabilities. The temperature in the room began to rise noticeably. For instance, Dax continued, Kargans, being reptilian, experience cognitive impairment when ambient temperatures exceed their thermoregulation capacity. Around 45 degrees Celsius, I believe. Vrex's pupils contracted to thin lines as the room grew increasingly hot. You're bluffing. Your own crew would suffer. About that, Dax said, pulling what looked like a small mint from his pocket and swallowing it. Humans invented these wonderful things called thermotolerance pills. Temporarily raises our heat tolerance by about 20 degrees. Standard issue for desert operations. My crew all took theirs about 10 minutes ago when we identified your ship as Kargan. Sweat was now visibly beading on Vrex's scales. This violates Confederacy Convention on Humane Treatment of Prisoners. Pirates citing the Confederacy Convention? That's rich, Dax laughed. But technically you're not prisoners. You're unauthorized boarders, and I'm simply adjusting my ship's environment to my personal preference. No law against that. The ship's intercom crackled to life with Mira's voice. Captain, Phase 1 complete. 6 packages secured. Ready for Phase 2. Packages? Vrex asked hoarsely, the heat now visibly affecting him. Your boarding party, Dax clarified. Currently experiencing various uncomfortable but technically non-lethal environmental adjustments tailored to Kargan neurophysiology. I believe you're familiar with the concept of species-specific breaking points. Commander Vrex had studied every known species' psychological breaking points, but he was now experiencing something new watching humans work past theirs. Where most species collapsed under pressure, these humans were transforming it into methodical, terrifying efficiency. Throughout the ship, the pirates were discovering what happened when humans decided that rules of engagement were more like guidelines. The environmental systems normally designed to maintain optimal conditions for all species had been weaponized with surgical precision against Kargan physiology. In Cargo Bay 3, Mira had efficiently corralled 4 disoriented pirates by alternating the gravity plating between 0.3G and 2G at irregular intervals, a simple trick that played havoc with reptilian inner ears, while humans, evolved under fluctuating planetary conditions, adjusted with minimal discomfort. The human female is implementing psychological warfare tactics banned in 16 star systems. One pirate gasped to another as they huddled in a corner, trying not to vomit. Technically, Mira called cheerfully from behind a cargo container. They're only banned in 15 systems. The Procyon Accord never ratified the amendment. Meanwhile, Dax was explaining the situation to an increasingly distressed Vrex. "Here's what's happening," Dax said, looking entirely comfortable, despite the now sweltering heat. "The ship's systems are currently cycling through environmental conditions particularly unpleasant for Kargan physiology heat spikes, specific sound frequencies that disrupt your inner ear, and atmospheric composition adjustments that make you feel like you're drowning on dry land." Vrex slumped in his chair, scales dulling as his body struggled to thermoregulate. "This is barbaric." "Barbaric?" Dax repeated with genuine surprise. "We haven't even broken any bones yet. This is just basic environmental manipulation. Wait until we get to the creative stuff." A new voice came over the intercom plips, the supposedly broken navigator. "Captain, all sections secure. The Kargan vessel has been locked down with their remaining crew aboard." Vrex's head snapped up. "Impossible. Your navigator was catatonic." Dax chuckled. "Actually, Plip was just following our standard protocol, what we call playing possum. Old Earth term. When facing superior numbers, pretend to be incapacitated, then strike when they lower their guard." "Your crew was faking their breaking points?" Vrex asked incredulously. "Not entirely," Dax admitted. "They were genuinely terrified. We just channeled that fear differently than you expected. You're used to species that shut down under stress. We're a species that redirects it." Across the ship, the alien crew members were indeed recovering their composure, watching with a mixture of horror and fascination as the humans executed their counterattack with cheerful efficiency. Gorks, monitoring systems from engineering, muttered to himself, "This is why we follow the captain's strange drills. Humans don't have breaking points, they have ignition points." In the medical bay, Krethnay was helping restrain a particularly aggressive pirate. "I never understood why Captain Dax insisted we learn 17 different methods of non-lethal restraint," she said to Mira. "Now I see." "Humans have a saying," Mira replied as she efficiently secured the pirate's limbs. "Hope for the best, plan for war crimes." Back in the captain's quarters, Dax leaned forward, his expression now serious. "Here's what happens next, Commander. You're going to order your remaining crew to stand down. Then you're going to tell us who hired you to intercept our medical shipment." "And if I refuse?" Vrex challenged, though with considerably less bravado than before. "Then we move to Phase 3, Dax said simply. Something in his tone made Vrex hesitate. "What is Phase 3? "That's where we get creative," Dax smiled. "And trust me, Commander, you really don't want to see humans get creative. The Geneva Conventions, the Arcturus Protocols, the serious amendments, all of these were created after humans demonstrated what creative problem-solving looks like." Vrex stared at Dax for a long moment, then slumped in defeat. The hegemony of Tau Ceti hired us. They want to prevent the medical supplies from reaching the frontier colonies. They believe sick colonists will be forced to return to hegemony space. Dax nodded. Now that wasn't so hard, was it? See what happens when we all cooperate. 3 days later, the Reasonable Doubt docked at Confederacy Outpost 47, where a bemused security detail took custody of the Kargan pirates. "Let me understand this," said Lieutenant Commander Sorix of Confederacy Security, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. "You're claiming these notorious pirates voluntarily surrendered and provided intelligence on hegemony operations?" "Something like that," Dax agreed, avoiding eye contact with his crew, who were struggling to maintain straight faces. The security officer reviewed his datapad. "And the environmental log anomalies?" "Technical malfunction," Gorks rumbled. "Very unfortunate. Many apologies." After providing statements and signing numerous forms, most of which Dax suspected would be quietly buried in bureaucratic archives, the crew gathered in the ship's common area for a debriefing. "I still don't understand," Plip said, his translucent body now pulsing with healthy blue light. "By all psychological models, humans should have broken under the stress. Instead, you became more effective." "It's an evolutionary quirk," Mira explained, applying ointment to her healing cheek. "Where most species developed clear breaking points as survival mechanisms like your catalepsy or Gorks' crystalline hardening, humans developed something different. We call it spite," Dax added helpfully. "That's not a psychological term," protested Krethne. "Maybe not," Dax conceded, "but it's accurate. When pushed to our limits, humans don't just break or flee. Sometimes we decide that if we're going down, we're taking the problem with us." "It's terrifying," Gorks observed. "It's effective," Mira countered. "It's probably why the Confederacy keeps humans around despite all the regulations we bend," Dax concluded. "Every other species has a breaking point. Humans have a pivot point where survival instinct transforms into something else entirely." The ship's AI chimed in, incoming transmission from Confederacy Command. The view screen activated to show an admiral whose species resembled an upright feline. "Captain Freeborn," she said formally, "I've reviewed the incident report regarding the Kargan pirates." Dax straightened. "Yes, Admiral?" "The report has been classified under Directive 7-3, subsection 12, incidents illustrating why we don't provoke humans. The medical supplies will proceed to their destination with Confederacy escort." She paused, then added more quietly, unofficially, "Well done. Just try to leave fewer psychological scars next time." As the transmission ended, the crew sat in thoughtful silence. "You know," Plip finally said, "there's an old Thraxi proverb, every creature has its limit. I think we need to amend that for humans." "Every species has a breaking point," Gork suggested. "Except humans, who turn that point into a war crime." Dax grinned. "I'll drink to that." Across the galaxy, the Kargan Dominion added a new rule to their piracy guidelines: avoid ships with human crew members. If unavoidable, surrender immediately. Some lessons are best learned without experiencing them firsthand.